there you were. All of a sudden, you've had a 100% increase in your mortgage.
Yes, no, it's more than that. It was like 3 times the amount, almost 3 times the amount.
Your quality of life's completely changed.
Yes. And then I found myself in court, and they admitted that they had securitised my mortgage. So they had committed perjury in the previous proceedings.
So sorry there, you just said that you arrested the judge then?
I knew that I had legally arrested him as a police officer. I had enforced one of my powers as a constable under the office of constable, and I had made the decision to arrest him.
So then,
They are, yeah.
right, you've been arrested.
Showbiz.
Yeah, I'll get it.
So, Anthony, you're in court. You've just arrested the judge. Your colleagues have come in, give the nod, but they've now arrested yourself,
Yes.
and they're now taking you away, and the judge has been left alone.
Yes. So when in the history of ever has someone been arrested by police, and then other police have turned up to arrest the police officer for having arrested the person? You know, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The one thing I want to point out is that it's not that I was just in the police 6 months. I was in the police for 10 years, and I arrested people for 10 years, and not one of my arrests was ever questioned or turned down. And I carried out the same process to arrest that judge that I did for every other arrest that was accepted. But later on in the media, they either said that I attempted to arrest the judge or threatened to. Because if I arrested him, as I claim that I have and can prove because I've got the audio, if that's true, then the PACE legislation must kick in and the judge must be taken to the custody suite. So as it stands, he was arrested. So if someone gets arrested and they make off, that person's deemed to be on the run. So John Gillen, the senior High Court judge, has been on the run since the 12th of January 2016.
Yeah. So what's your thought process now? So you're now you're being taken away then to where?
So they took me to Musgrave Street Police Station where the judge should have been taken. So they brought me in there under the pretense of 2 assaults. I never touched anyone at any stage. You know, you can't do something of that nature and be seen to be violent or not. You know, I was completely professional about it, and there was like 20 witnesses in the court that day.
So there in the court that day, then they arrested you on the grounds of
An assault. An alleged assault against the judge, who I never physically went close to, and his tip staff. So when I went over to the door, the big door he went through. It's about 12 foot high, and it's a big thick door. And they opened the door to come out, and I tried to put my fingers in to hold the door open. And the guy seen me, and he slammed it shut. So if I had to put my fingers in, it's like a big metal door. My digits would have been lying on the inside of that door. So what he tried to say was that I reached in, grabbed his hand and twisted it and done all this stuff. And the barrister, who was on the far side of the room, gave a statement to police saying that he saw me doing that. And he was at the far side of the room and was able to see through my body to what my hand was doing, because my back was to him. And he was like 15, 20 metres away. So I was just, and basically, as I'm seeing it there, that arrest of me was to get me out of the court. And then they were using that to interview me about everything that happened and then bail me. And that dealt with their problems while they had a roundtable discussion how they're going to deal with it. And the bottom line was then I was held in contempt of court, and then that superseded it. And whenever the contempt of court proceedings were finished, the assault charges were never followed up. This purported assault, it was just absolute nonsense. So I was arrested, took to Musgrave Street Police Station. And when I went in there, I basically told them that, you know, my detention was unlawful, that I tried to explain everything to the sergeant. And basically I was interviewed by the police ombudsman. So that they interview police for wrongdoing, right? But they have no powers against the public. So if the police had have interviewed me, then anything I alleged that had happened was a counter allegation, and they're duty bound to investigate that. So this was like a technical move. They got the ombudsman straight in. So they interviewed me. They done one interview, and I'm just open and transparent and said everything that happened, and they did it in one take. And then I was released that night on bail. So what happened? Sorry, one of the most important things that happened was that while I was in custody, The judge who I had arrested requested that I be brought back to the court. Right, so when you're in a PSNI PACE custody suite, there's only certain ways you can leave that custody suite. You're lawfully detained. It all has to be booked and everything has to be done according to PACE. So you're either going to be like de-arrested and let go without any charges. So you walk out of there with no paper. You're going to be reported to the PPS with a view to prosecution. So you're given a piece of paper. You're going to be charged to court. So you can either be given a piece of paper for 30 days or else you can be detained and charged to court the next day. You can be removed if you have a heart attack or something. You can be removed by an ambulance. There's no paperwork, and you can be transferred to prison. Right? There's a limited amount of ways you can be removed lawfully from a PACE custody suite. So when the judge requested I be brought back to the court, I said to them, "Where's the piece of paper? Where's the piece of paper, or the summons, or there has to be some legal mechanism for you to remove me lawfully from a PACE custody suite." So that baffled them. So they rang legal services. And Ralph Roach was the name of the guy. He came back and his opinion was, if a judge says jump, we say how high. That was his legal definition. So the police then were removing me. So I said to the police, and this is where it gets a bit dramatic, is I said to the police, and I was thinking on my feet very, very quickly. So I said to the police, I says, I refuse to leave. I says, I don't give you permission to put your hands on me, and I refuse to leave. If you want me to go with you, you have to use force. I says, so if you put your hand gently on my shoulder and just push me forward a wee bit, I'll go wherever you want. I'll not put up any struggle or anything like. So the police says, right, we're going out now. And I says, I refuse to go. You have to use force. He put his hand on me and he pushed me gently, and I walked and went out through the door. We arrived at the police car. I said to him, I refuse to get into that car. I says, if you want to put me in the car, you have to use force. He opened the door. He gently put his hand on my shoulder and pushed me forward. And then I get into the car and put on my seatbelt. So we're sitting in the car, and I says, look, lads, I'm not trying to be a big drama queen here. I says, but do you know what offence you've just committed against me? I says, so if you look at policing overall, a policeman can go and kick in your door if he can justify it. If you did it, it's criminal damage. If he does it and he can justify it, it's not a crime. That's what the office of constable is. So a policeman can do something that would ordinarily be a crime, but if he can justify it, it's not a crime. So what I said to him was, I says, you have to have a legal mechanism to justify your actions. So I says, so you don't have a piece of paper or any lawful reason why you're removing me from a PACE custody suite. I says, so you're removing me and you're using force to do it, and you're taking me away in a car. I says, you've just kidnapped me. You have used force to take me against my will and to put me into a car. Look at the definition. You know what I mean? It'd be good for you to put up the definition on the screen now of kidnap in the UK right now to see, was I being dramatic about it? So they took me back to the court. I was took into the court. At that point, the prison staff put handcuffs on me and they put me in a wee cell in the back of the High Court. And I was in there for about 45 minutes, and then I was brought into the court. The judge that I arrested came out. I mean, the court was packed. Every barrister and QC and everybody was just bunged to capacity. So the judge came out and he starts reading. It's literally an A4 piece of paper that someone had typed up in Word. It didn't have a court emblem. It didn't have any signatures. It started talking about having contempt of court. Contempt in court is a creature of the civil law. So it's a civil offence. It's not a criminal offence. And he started reading this, and it was contempt in the face of court. And when he started speaking, I stood up and I says, you're not allowed to conduct these proceedings because you've been arrested. You can't be a judge in your own matter. Like, that was a conflict of interest. It should have been another judge. And when I said that, he says, sit down or I'll have you arrested. And I just held up the handcuffs. You only double arrest me here, like. So I sat back down. I wasn't disrespectful, but he read this stuff about this contempt of court and then was going to hold me in for a hearing. And I said that I disagree. I didn't consent to him holding the hearing because he was under arrest and there was a conflict. So anyway, so I was took out of there, took back to Musgrave Street Police Station, and then when everything was finished there, they then released me on bail for 28 days. But before the 28 days was up, I was in court for the contempt of court. So I was in this. I was in all the newspapers. I was front page of the freaking Sun and the Mirror and everything else. This police officer attempted to or threatened to arrest the judge. And so the contempt of proceedings, whenever, it's funny now when I look back on it, but as far as I could see it, there was, whenever I was in court, when I observed what I believed to be a crime happening, I brought myself in duty, and I did my duty as a constable, as I was trained exactly in PACE. and I arrested a judge. It was unusual. Most 99% of police wouldn't have done that, but it doesn't make my actions unlawful. They had to be investigated, and I had to be questioned about that, but it never happened.
So you had been brought back. You were taken back to Musgrave. They had read out the contempt of court. What
Yes.
ruling did he give? So you're coming back for here, or
So they would put me in a trial for contempt of court. So I made it clear. So this is the funny part that happened then. So on the first day of the hearing, I went down into the court and I thought, right, I'm being put on a trial for contempt of court here for doing my job exactly as I was trained as a police officer. So what I did was I took my police uniform in a bag down into the court, and through security, went into the toilets, got changed into the police uniform. I had no belt rig, so I had no weapons, I had no nothing else. It was just literally the green uniform and the hat. And I walks into the court, and there's peelers all over the place, and everybody's looking about and stuff. And they go, hello, constable, how are you? And no one noticed that I hadn't the belt rig on. So eventually someone sort of twigged and went, that's him there in the uniform, right? So whenever the judge came out, 2 police officers approached me, and then we went up and sat in a wee box. So it was an armed police officer, me, and then another armed police officer, and we're all in police uniform. And the judge comes out, and he goes, where's Mr. Carlin? And he's looking around, and the middle policeman stood up. So proceedings went on, and he was talking and stuff, and I told him I objected to the proceedings. I says, in the case where a police officer has arrested a judge, I feel that I can't get a fair trial at the hands of the colleagues and friends. You are golfing friends and you work together. I can't get a fair trial in Northern Ireland at the hands of any judge, so I require a jury. And juries were taken away in like 1971 or something during the Troubles and stuff, and they've never been reinstated. But I'm entitled, in these circumstances, I need to explain what happened to a jury of my peers and explain to them what happened, what I done, why I done it, what the evidence was, what I suspected, and then what the rules and regulations are that govern police. And did I act within the capacity of my job? If I acted within the capacity of my job, then the chief constable takes his vicarious liability. So if any policeman out in the street does something that they shouldn't do, it's that victim versus the chief constable that goes to court. So as long as I acted within the remit of my job, which I definitely did, it should have been whoever was taking an action against me, it should have been them versus the chief constable. The chief constable stood back, never backed me up. I was a boots on the ground police officer, and I did my job, and they just abandoned me. They didn't give me any help whatsoever.
who was the chief constable at the time? Flanagan?
George Hamilton, BFG. I call him Big Fat George.
But the reason why you wanted a jury there was just to simply to get a fair trial.
That's all it was. Like, what I did was unusual. 99% of peelers wouldn't have done it, and I was in hot water, and I went against the entire system. And
Can I ask, sorry, where were you in what way did this leave you with work?
Traumatized.
No. Were you on suspension?
Was
there any action brought to you against you at this point?
I was basically, they came and took the uniform all off me, and I was basically suspended at that point.
At what point? The very just after the initial bust up with the
no, to be honest, I think at that point I was on sick leave at that point. I had a lower back problem at that point, and I was off on sick leave, and so but whenever I arrested the judge, but whenever I wore the uniform into court, they came and they took the uniform all off me, and then they suspended me at that point.
You're not allowed to wear a uniform while you're not on duty, is that right?
I mean, I did it. Why I explained to the judge, I did it for a specific reason. It wasn't just and people get that confused, and they try to make out that when I arrested the judge, I was wearing my uniform and I wore, all this sort of stuff, and that's why I had to be clear.
But it was theatrical.
I did it, and I intended it to be theatrical, but I did it to make a point, and I was very clear and very articulate when I said to the judge, I said, I'm in court today for contempt of court, and I've been arrested, and I'm facing going to jail here because I did my job as a police officer. All I did was my job exactly how I was trained. So if I'm being put on trial as a police officer, I visually wore my uniform today to remind you that I am a police officer, and that's what I did. It's not some random person that's just decided to arrest the judge. I'm relying on the police and the powers and the office of constable. And they say that there's a document that I can provide to you. It's Jane, somebody I think her name is. It's a girl who was in charge of the police federation in England for 25 years. And when she retired, her retirement, she done a wee blog on the office of constable, how the Office of Constable started, what the powers are and everything else. And in there it very clearly says that the independent Office of Constable is there as a check and balance for the balance of power, so that, you know, each officer can make their own independent decision, and it's not, you know, and they're entitled to do that, and that's there. So for them to say that I couldn't do what I've done just isn't true. But they try to make out the entire time that I threatened or attempted to arrest them, and I've got the audio to prove that that's not true.
So
it's
what?
Very simple for me to prove.
So you were in court, obviously dressed and all. What was the ruling then for that?
So again, it went on over maybe 5 hearings.
Yeah.
But what happened was I objected to the judge that I had arrested being any part of those proceedings, because it was a conflict of interest and I wasn't going to get a fair trial. And I demanded a jury trial, and they used Black's Law Dictionary and I quoted stuff to them and stuff, and that was all ignored. And it says, no, we're going to try you, and that's just the end of it. But then I think they went away and cooler heads prevailed. So in an attempt to make it appear impartial, they brought in the Attorney General. So the Attorney General was then prosecuting me, or it was under Article 52 of the Rules of Judicature. It's civil law. It's not a criminal record. I still have no criminal record, but it was the Attorney General who was then prosecuting that case. So it was the Attorney General versus me.
Just on that, so at any point, like you're saying the Attorney General against you, at no point did you think, I need a solicitor, barrister, I need them people, or did you not trust anybody?
No, I've as time has went on, my distrust of the legal system has just increased. And as soon as in law, as soon as you take on a solicitor, they step into your shoes legally, and they become the adult and you become the child. And if you try to speak in court and you've got a solicitor, you're told to sit down and shut up. So they take your power away. If that solicitor can do anything in your name, make any agreements, you know, whatever they want to do, and do deals and stuff outside of your knowledge and control. And the solicitors are basically the part of the bar. You know.
So by getting a solicitor or barrister, you were losing the control.
Very much, and it wasn't about.
But can I ask, who would have took you on?
Who would have took me?
Because what barrister would have wanted to go against a high court judge?
Exactly.
Because you've made your job 10 times harder when. So if the barrister won, every judge in the land was out for him. Whether they don't be, they're impartial. They're
so
not.
No, in fairness, the only thing that police did for me was they offered me free legal representation, and there was a company that always does police stuff, and they sent a barrister that day to represent me, and I made it very clear that I didn't want representation.
Oh, he was
I would do it myself.
Bullet dodged for him. He was happy to get out of there.
But can you?
And I don't mean. I'm just trying to say, you know, no, because we're saying that judges are above emotion. They're above, you know, that they would handle that as in, okay, this is a factual and robotic, but they're human. And if a barrister come along and stuck one to them, the next time they're presenting a case in front of them, it would be very hard to get the pendulum to swing.
My concern was that they would all collude together for my demise, and that I wouldn't get a fair trial. So, I mean, just as a bit of feedback from you, do you just think? I mean, it's a crazy situation. It's mad. The whole thing's mad. But if you were in that position, would you think that you would get a fair trial at the hand of any judge in Northern Ireland having just arrested a senior judge? Or
I'm gonna be honest with you. Would I have the tenacity and the doggedness to dig in? Would I have folded the chips and said, fuck it, take my house and fuck yous? You know, I'll start again. You know, there has to be
but that's you're going on to a different topic there.
But it is the same. Would I have come this far? Would I have packed house and says, sorry judge, made a mistake, sorry your honour, is there any way we can let this drift away? And probably in the sake of public interest, if you had made a quick apology, was that ever put to you?
Was.
So you were given the option, you ain't going down?
No. What happened was basically the Attorney General prosecuted it. It was the Lord Chief Justice and Justice Horner who presided, 2 judges. The case was heard. When it came down to me arguing about whether it was a lawful arrest and everything else, they came in. The Attorney General said that there wasn't a scintilla of evidence to suggest that I could arrest the judge. But they're escaping the fact that no one can tell you to arrest or tell you to de-arrest. No one can make up the mind of a constable other than the constable, and he has to justify his actions. No one can, so it was my decision, and I had to be dealt with on the merit of it. So someone else's opinion didn't matter. Whether they felt it or not, there had to be a trial of the matter. But the bottom line was the hearing went on, and the judge jailed me for 3 months. He found me guilty, and he sentenced me to 3 months in Maghaberry prison. Custodial. Effective immediately.
So you got 3 months custodial sentence?
Yes.
That, I've heard of people being held in contempt and maybe get a week, and they never actually get custodial. Or I suppose there's different degrees of contempt of court. People have tried to attack somebody in the court, so maybe there has been higher degrees than that. But you're a serving police officer, and you've now received a 3-month custodial sentence.
And I'm going into prison as a police officer. The BBC News, ITV News, newspapers, and whatever else.
Oh, the country knew.
They knew about it. But the most important thing is that the population within Maghaberry prison have only one access to information, and that's the TV.
And they weren't painting you in the narrative that you wanted.
They knew that I was coming. They knew that a serving police officer was coming for arresting a judge. And
would that have made you more? Would they be like, they try to take them down, or are you still a screw that they're going to come after?
Right. So first of all, an appealer, so they don't like me.
Yeah.
But then also they're sitting going, he did something that I would only dream of doing, or fair play to him, or there was that sort of side of it too. But I knew there'd be people maybe would have respect for me in there, and people that would be just no matter what, just hate peelers. That's it.
But the peelers, and I'm sorry to categorise this, ex-peelers, pedos, do they not all go to the same protective custody?
And they're supposed to. So what I said was, right, so they put it on the news. Right, so you're talking there, this is February, 17th of February 2016. We are less than a month away from the 100th year anniversary of the 1916 uprising. Yeah. Everybody in the security forces knew that either a police officer or a prison officer or a soldier was going to be killed or blew up. Right? And was this when I didn't know about this? But okay. Right, so 1916.
No, I'm aware of that, but I didn't know that a centenary was going to be marked with the death of somebody.
No, but what I'm saying is,
it was unspoken, or was
unspoken? Unspoken
right, okay.
Is someone's going to try and mark this occasion. Security risk was through the roof.
Okay,
right. So it turns out Adrian Ismay, prison officer, had a bomb blow his minibus. It blew up.
Yes.
Whatever was happened to him medically, he was took to hospital.
He died a few weeks later, isn't
and then
right?
he came out, and then he dropped dead. Yeah. And I sent a letter to his widow from prison. I don't know if she ever got it or anything else. But I honestly believe, because the police, there's an unwritten rule, if a police officer, so there was another police officer at that time that was arrested, he was on his way to buy an illegal firearm. He had Class A drugs on him, and he was running a house with prostitutes. And police jumped on him, right, and arrested him and everything else. And they said it's Constable Joe Bloggs, care of Strandtown Police Station. Right, so this guy's clearly up to criminality, but the unwritten rule is the name and the station you serve in.
Yeah.
Whenever I arrested a judge, they said, Constable Thomas Anthony Carlin of this street in this town.
Well, they named your address. A huge security risk.
Everything but the number, and that's and they did that to me, and that they broke their own rules by doing that. But they did that for me, and it was on the news, and I seen it, and I was sitting going, like, what are they playing at? So the population in Maghaberry prison knew I was coming, right? And I was more worried about the security stuff, because I put pretty much my address and everything else on the news 4 weeks before the anniversary of this year. It turns out when I was in prison, this man was killed, and it could have been me, it could have been my family, and that was a massive security risk. The PSNI have a duty of care to me still as an employee. I still was a constable in prison.
You were still
a constable in prison.
Okay.
Right, so I'm in the prison there. The big thing for me that day was...
How does that work? How can you be a serving police officer while you are currently in the custody of Her Majesty's pleasure?
Only for the fact that they didn't have time to sack me. But it happened. Right, so I'm in prison as a serving police officer. I'm public target number one. I'm probably worse than the paedophiles to them. Do you know what I mean? Because they're in prison because of police, and they want to vent their frustration on it. So,
and were you put in a protected? Were you put in protected?
I was the very first night when I went in, strip searched, all that sort of stuff. Got the tracksuit bottoms on, put into a cell, and the door shut. That's my memory of it. Was this big 12-inch thick door shutting, and I was in there, and I'm in prison. I was like, I fucking cursing. I don't like curse here, but just like, I'm in fucking prison, just the reality of that, and just in this one wee cell, I was in the cell by myself. So they kept me in isolation that way. So I was in a cell by myself. But so I'm in that cell 23 hours a day, and I'm allowed out to go for a shower and stuff in the morning. But when I go to the shower blocks, everyone's doors open and they're all walking about freely. You go down to the corner of any cell, on the four corners of the cell block, there's one of those, them hot geysers, just instant hot water. So they can go and get a cup. They have free access to that. So whenever, the next day when I got up, they says, you're on video link. You have to go. So they brought me over into a different block and put me on video link to appear in the court. And when I was over there, they put me in a cell by myself. So there's a cell with the glass doors or perspex doors, and there's like maybe 8 people in there. So they put me in my own cell, right, a wee wooden one. And written on it was that somebody was a pedo or somebody was something else, and that they would put, it's like £100 or something into their kitty if that person was stabbed, slashed, or scalded. So that's what they do in the prison. They write it up places. This person needs to be somehow harmed, and you'll get, whoever does it gets £100. You have lifers and stuff in there. They just want, more Mars bars and jigsaws. It doesn't matter to them. So anybody could have.
I have to be honest with you. I think that's a great thing. The pedos get that, but if you're wrongly in there.
Aye, but wait, hear what happened then. So basically, what happened was, at one point it was moved up. So I was on the outside facing out of the prison, and then they moved me to an internal cell, so I could look into the square, and they're all talking through the windows. They're all going, boys. One boy's going, I hear there's a fucking peeler in here. He's a fucking root. That's a paedophile. I heard he done this. I heard he done that. I'm going to stiff the fucker. I'm going to this. And I'm listening to this whole conversation, just sitting listening to it. And so eventually they found out where I was at. And when they were out in the yard, they were throwing up like empty Coke bottles and all at my window and fag butts and shouting, and they're going to stiff me and just all threats all the time. A couple of wee incidents where a big monster of a guy fucking come over to me and went, you're a fucking peeler, I fucking, you know what I mean? It's very, very intimidating, but as I say, it's not that I think I'm anything special or I'm a tough guy, but I'm scared of nothing, but I risk assess everything. If somebody comes at me, I'll try and deal with it the best I can, but I don't walk about in fear and being spooked and stuff. So
well, I'm going to be honest with you, I will be fucking shitting myself.
But that's bound to mess with your head. Like you thought you were going to go into court to get this fair deal, and all of a sudden then, well, not all of a sudden, this went on over a period of how long, and then you're now in jail yourself.
Yes.
In prison.
So, but just to get back to what we said earlier there, the judges, when they gave me 3 months, said, if you apologise, we'll let you out after 28 days. And I was left with that decision. So if I had made a mistake and done the wrong thing, if I step on someone's toes or bumped into someone, if I do anything like that there, I'm apologising straight away. I'm not apologising for something that I meant to do and that I believe was justified. So I'm not going to, my personal opinion, but I'm sitting there in a prison cell for turned out 6 weeks. She served half the time. So I'm in there for 6 weeks. My wife's out there. She's dealing, remember, the son was in a car crash in a coma. She's going to RVH to visit her son who's in a coma, and then she's going to McGarry to visit me. She's dealing with the 2 kids. The police aren't supporting her. The police never came near her once to ask her, was she okay? Did she need, I'm going to end up crying here, I'm sorry.
Oh, hey, take your time. Because you're telling a very, very stressful part of your life, and it's all...
It's not that I feel sorry for myself. I'm sitting there. It's frustration.
I have to be honest. I think you're holding it well because fuck, I'd have said sorry on the way in and on the way out. I would have fucking. I suppose it's your integrity at that point. You have to make the decision. You know, everything you felt, you've done right to this point, and here you are now. Somebody shouting, they're going to stiff you. You're a fucking root.
But you have no idea how much I hold myself to account on the inside, and my actions. I act according.
There
to
has
my
to be
principles.
there has to be a war in yourself, as in how much do I be honest to myself, hold these accountable, or just fucking. Is there never a time when you say fuck this? It's not fucking worth it.
Do you see if the 4 of us here went up into a farm, you know them electrified fences, and we all decided to go for and grab it, see who can hold on the longest. People have a pain threshold. Yeah. Some people have a 2 and they touch it and they're nearly friggin' dead. I've got 100. See, when it comes to dealing with this stuff, you have no idea the resolve I have and the control I have
It's
on myself.
not you. It's not directly you. You may handle it, but it has to overflow to the people in your life.
No, but listen to me. Look at the state that this world's in at this minute in time.
Yeah.
Right? I'm fit and able for this, and I've got certain skills that I've got that enable me to cope, right? Am I going to pussy out and leave this problem for my children to deal with in 30 years' time? Do you want to leave this for your kids, or does it need dealt with?
Look,
All I'm looking for is for people to have an open, honest discussion about something that there's facts and evidence and logic and reason that backs it up. It's not made up in my head. I can prove what I'm saying. The Freddie Andrews story, we haven't got to that yet. That blew my mind.
right. Fuck. The whole thing's blew my mind at the moment. But where are we at?
My wife, I'm in prison, 28 days. My wife's outside dealing with all the shit she's dealing with. The police haven't went near her door to ask her anything. The only time they came to see me was to serve me documents. They sacked me. They didn't ask me was it safe. I asked them to put me in, can you put me in special measures here? Like, I'm definitely a target in here. We'll wait and see what happens. So then next thing, it was a traveller, some traveller guy, whatever. He came to the door and he threatened to kill me. In through the door. He came in, I heard this, I was sleeping, heard this bang, bang, bang at the door, and I got up and sort of groggy, went to the glass, it was like bulletproof glass, looked through, and this pair of evil eyes looking at me. And he goes, I heard you're a fucking peeler. And he started shouting and roaring at me. And whenever you're in the jungle, you have to just, so I punched the door. And I says, I just gave it back to him and asked him who he was and done all the big bravado stuff. And there's a big 12-inch door between us, like. But he threatened to kill me. And there was a prison officer, a female, that heard it. And fair play to her, some of them wouldn't bother their ushers, but she went and reported it. And as a direct result of that, I was then moved over to the hospital wing.
You could have saved your fucking life.
Right, but the hospital wing is in McGabry. It's the paedophile wing.
I actually was thinking, what's fucking worse here? Men coming up looking to beat the head of you, stab you, or fucking living a month with them bastards? Probably self-preservation is, I'll go over here and fuck. Oh, it would make me sick to have to look at someone. Like you spent 10 years putting them cunts away. I
know, right? And I totally get all that there. And it's like, it's something, I have a really zany sense of humour, and I have to have humour in my life about this here, otherwise you'd get mad. But one of the things that I would come out with is I would say to people, I don't judge people, I arrest judges. Right? But I literally don't judge anyone. I don't judge anyone that I've walked a mile in their shoes sort of thing, because people have a lot of stresses in their life, right? So when I went in there, as much as I am completely and utterly repulsed by paedophiles and everything else, and I didn't want to hear their stories and everything else, but I was in an environment with them. There's a pool table that's more relaxed. There's one guy in a wheelchair with 2 legs missing, another guy had a heart operation, and the rest of them were paedophiles. There's another guy that had assaulted, there was a wee young boxer, he was a real up-and-coming boxer, and he was stabbed.
Yep.
His dad
was a foreign boy.
As a foreign boy.
It was the girlfriend or the sister or something.
I didn't know anything about it. All I knew is this guy was in prison.
Turkish or something
like that there, and he was speaking away to me, and to say I didn't know about his case or anything else. I heard a couple of whispers.
Eamon McGee's son.
But and that was it. Do you know what I mean? That's a freaking sin that happened to that guy. You know, it's an absolute tragedy. But so he was in the wing there. He was under a big threat. Jerry Adams' brother.
An pedo.
He's in there. He's lazy.
Liam or something. What do you call him?
Like Liam. Pedo. And so when I went in there, right, so I'm in a strange environment. We're sitting here eating these new funky cups you've got here, right? So when you go into prison, you've got a plastic cup. Do you ever drink tea out of a plastic cup? It's just, right. So I have a plastic cup. So Liam, Jerry Adams' brother, come up. And he's a police officer. And he's from the Republican end of stuff. So he shouldn't be speaking to me or anything else. He was a gentleman. I'm not judging him for what he did. He was judged by his peers. He went to prison and he was serving his time. And his issues between him and the person he committed the crime against, it's not for me to judge. I was in this place. To me, he was an absolute gentleman. He was very nice. He always spoke to me. He gave me books. He gave me books on banking fraud and stuff. And he gave me a set of nail clippers. If you want to cut your nails in jail, you have to order and pay for a set of clippers on a Monday between 9 and 10. And if you miss that, you don't get them for another week. And when you order them, it takes a week for them to arrive. Everything's really slow. So he gave me a pair of nail cutters. If we rag nail balling or something like that there, he gave me a porcelain cup, he gave me books and stuff like that there, and I found him to be a really nice man. Do you know what I mean? And his say whatever he did for somebody else to judge him on. But when I was in there, so I'm sitting there, my cell is a mirror image of the cell next door. So the cells are sitting like this here, my bed's here, and the bed and the next one's up against the wall. My sink's there, his sink's there, right? The cell that I was in, there's a guy, I think his surname was Black. He was a notorious child killer. He was driving a white van up and down England and then come over to Northern Ireland and he killed kids.
And I think there's some that he's not told he's toying. Is that yes, cunt?
So he died. He died around the time that I arrested the judge. Mm-hmm. So I get put into a cell. And my cell was next to his. So I'm lying there.
Oh, fuck it, I'd rather fucking went over the other side and had them cunts trying to kill me.
That melted my head, right? So I'm in this cell next to a convicted child killer. And I was in jail because I did my job as a police officer and I still standing over it. And this guy killed children. And I'm sitting in there, my wains are at home. And no father. I'm going to start ground again here, but that really upset me. I cried out of frustration. I sat there and thought, wait, what they've done.
There's a mixture, Sean, is there not a mixture of emotions going through your mind right now? Like, I genuinely mean this. I think I'd take my fucking chances. I couldn't look at them cunts, whether they were being nice to me or not. There
was a guy there and he had a Zimmer frame. And every so often he would come into the pull room. And he would come in and he had to drag his legs. And you thought, this guy's, a wee poor old man. Him and his wife had some foreign girl in their basement.
Oh, fuck. I seen.
Do you know what I mean? And
you're with the fucking celebrities of the scumbag world in Northern Ireland.
And as much as that, and I'm very strict about that there, that I don't judge other people.
I get what you're saying, and you're better than me because fuck it, I judge them. I couldn't. It fucking make my skin crawl, them cunts right now.
I would run through brick walls to hunt them down.
Put that Zimmer frame over his head.
But I wouldn't exact my own vengeance on them.
I know.
What I'm saying?
But judging people by their actions, that was their actions. I would judge them. I'd be like, your actions. But you're in here for that reason.
I'm not judging you for
not
holding that impartial, because I have to be honest with you. I think that's a self-preservation. There's a never level there where you're like, you're in shock, you're in prison, you're just doing what you need to do now to get through, and you find yourself in a fucking parallel universe from what you set out to be, looking justice, to be shacked up with the worst cunts you could imagine. If you had to write a book about it, you fucking have the celebrity list of it. But anyway, you're 28 days.
So it came to the 28th days.
Yeah.
28th day, and you've nothing else to do but think about time. So you're on the phone. Prison officer or prison's population are screwed over when it comes to phones. The amount of money you spend on that wee card to phone home when you're standing in the queue and there's only one phone and everything else, you could have the best of phones on the biggest contract every single month. They're absolutely creaming it in there. They're being stroked and these looked at. So I queued up.
I think that's to cut down connectivity with outside world.
I know,
for criminal activity.
But no, I just think it's highly unfair. I wasn't up to any criminal acts and I found it very difficult to
But I mean,
home.
if somebody had fucking 200 minutes of talk time in prison, which half of them were smuggling them in their ass, if they fucking 200 minutes of talk time, the shit they can orchestrate from inside. But anyway, sorry,
yes,
go on ahead.
Phone calls can be traced and stuff, and every phone call is listened to. If you're doing any of that sort of stuff, I understand that, but I think that was unfair, genuinely. So I ring my wife, ring her up, and I say, right, Maxine, today's day 28. I says, they said to me, if I apologise today, I'm released. I said, you're out there dealing with it. I says, I know what my decision is, but that's not relevant. I says, it's your choice. I says, you're out there, you're dealing with Aidan, he's in hospital, you're up and down to RVH every day, you're dealing with the kids, the peelers haven't done one thing to assist you, the money, but she was stretched for money. She was dealing with everything. And I says, it's your choice. And she says, tell the judge to go and fuck himself.
So she was all in too.
And I say, I burst out crying. I went into my room, I burst out crying. When I went in there, Justin Bieber was playing. Is it too late now to say sorry? And I was like fucking moonwalking up and down and fucking hee.
Yeah.
I was over the moon because I felt supported. I felt very alone in there, and that everybody in the world thought that what I did was wrong, and I was a looper and lost everything else. And she supported me, and I'll never forget her for that.
Yeah.
Fuck. What would you do?
Don't know. I haven't.
Kids at home.
Fuck not in this man's shoes.
I know.
But at the same sense,
it's fucking hard.
You cannot just say sorry to somebody that you know yourself, you're right in what you're fighting for.
They wouldn't have had to wait 28 days for me to apologise if I thought for 1 second that anything that I did was
exactly
wrong. They wouldn't have had to have asked me.
Yeah.
But what they wanted to do was, if I apologised, then that
vindicated,
invalidated my position and it exonerated them. I wasn't for doing that. But again, I left that down to the risk. Would my wife say, no, look, I need you to come home, it's too tough?
So you got your P45 in prison?
No, so they came out to serve me in documents. They weren't interested in my welfare. They weren't interested in my wife's welfare, my kids, anything about me, whether I was in trouble or anything else. They came to serve me documents. So when they did that, they actually took me out one day and signed me out and brought me around to headquarters to try and sack me there so that I went in as a peeler and come out as a civilian. And I had the wherewithal in my head. I mean, my head was fried at the time, but I was able to say enough and put up enough of an argument to stop them from firing me that day. And then so it came out, and it meant that if I was in the police for 2 weeks or 3 weeks longer, it was 2 or 3 weeks more wages, because I was thinking about the family. So the bottom line is, I got out of prison, and of all days, it was April Fool's Day. If you come out, you know what, Moira, the roundabout, there's a wee cafe place there. Yeah. So I just wanted a proper scran, so just went around there and had something to eat, went in there and sat, and then so I was just relieved to get out, seeing the kids, big hugs and stuff. It was even tough. The kids come to visit me in prison. Do you know what I mean? That was tough for them, but tried to keep it just as normal as it could.
So how long were you in total then?
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
6 weeks is nothing. Do you know what I mean? 6 weeks is nothing.
Fucking right out of time if you're a bunch of pedos.
But in the circumstances that I was arrested, I'm a legend for having done my job, having threats in my life, the police not supporting me. If my arrest was lawful, as I still maintain, and the audio will 100% prove that, then the police completely abandoned me. They abandoned the duty of care to me. The amount of damages I should be due from them and their inaction and failing to support me, and the fact that no other peeler had a concern about it. Again, it's down to the media. They sort of portrayed me that I had this momentary moment of madness, or just he cracked under the pressure, and there's no possible way that he could justify arresting a judge, and I still maintain it.
So you're out now. You've now lost your job.
No, so I come out of prison, then they start sending me the documents, and that process started. So whenever I came out of prison, I was invited over by a good friend, that had come to know from going to all these sort of meetings about fighting banks and stuff. And he invited me over at one of them Heidi High camps, all the chalets. Me and the wife were took over there for 5 days just to get away. And when I was over there, I was took to the studios of the UK Column. So they do a daily podcast. They're very good, Brian Gersh and stuff like that. So they interviewed me. It was the first ever time I did an interview. And I was surprised how well I came across, because I was just literally out of prison. Like when I went into my kitchen, the kitchen desktop seemed, the kitchen top, it looked as if it was a lot further down, or I felt as if it was taller. When I was swiping my phone, it seemed alien, because I had been just isolated away from all of that stuff. Everything, my perceptions and all were it took a while to kick in. But that interview, again, I'm still sticking to the same story. My story hasn't changed the whole time. So I was interviewed then, and then I came back home, and then I was sacked. And then after I was sacked, then I was invited to speak at AV7, alternative view as Ian R. Crane. And basically I wore my orange Guantanamo Bay t-shirt as one of them, you know what I mean? So I wore that, and I basically broke it down, did a PowerPoint presentation of the legislation, the offences, the wording of them, the definitions, what happened, how it happened, everything. I couldn't have been more clear about it, but what I've done. Police officers up and down the country, nobody's approached me to support me. No one's approached me to say anything, and there was a few of them behind closed doors, but overall, police didn't support me. I think it's a freaky thing, and they didn't know what to think.
Yeah.
So
you're sacked now, but all in the background of this, are you still fighting Santander?
Yes. So it took about a year. I mean, all that madness going on. Then next thing, I get an email from the court saying the last time we spoke before the incident, we were about to give costs to the other side.
They hadn't delivered the decision, had they?
No, he was handing down judgment. I waited for him to finish, so I wasn't interrupting him. And then he was talking about costs, which kicked in the Fraud Act. Okay. And then I acted. So they basically went back to there, and they says, because of what happened, we'll deal with it by email, because the judge doesn't want you in front of him again, like sort of thing, So
I'd say that's unheard of.
Right. So then we
There's
have to
a lot of first in this shit, isn't there?
Right. So this year, I don't know if I know I've told you, and I know you had a big surprise whenever I told you, but basically I'm in the High Court for the contempt of court proceedings. A whole lot of people, just all the people who feel that they've been screwed over in the courts were just like ants all over the place, right? So a lot of people became friends and all over it, So one girl came up to me and she handed me an A4 package, and she says, I know you're up to your ears, but please keep that and please read it. So I took it home at that stage, and then it was later I was put in prison. So after coming out of prison and stuff, I read these documents, and it's about a story called the Freddie Andrews story, right? So it, for me, is the biggest legal scandal in Northern Ireland's history ever, and not many people know about it. And it surrounds I'm going to try and keep it as tight as possible because I know we're going for time. But it was a vulnerable, disabled man. He had heard voices and stuff like that when he was 16. He was a cricket player. Came from a very wealthy family. They own a house. It's 14 Castle Hill Road in Belfast. If you had a drone in the front garden and you lifted it up over the trees, you would see Stormont. It's right beside the right. So it's a good postcode. They owned that house. They owned a car showroom in Belfast back in the 60s before it was ever trendy. They owned rows of houses in Belfast, like wee terrace houses, and they owned a plot of land where Castle Court is, I think the car park. Very wealthy family, like a couple of £1 million, maybe £1.2 million. Back then was a lot of money. So the son got really sick, and the dad took him over for this treatment, which turned out to be a lobotomy. They thought it was state-of-the-art treatment, so they cut out like a quarter of his brain, and after that he was just like special needs, or he couldn't speak properly. He dribbled and whatever. He wasn't in a good state. So the family were devastated. So they put all of the above properties, including Tara House, which is 14 Castle Hill Road in Belfast. They put that in his name, Freddie Andrews Jr. in his name. All the terraced houses, all the property. And then the father's will was basically that Freddie Andrews Jr. should be kept in that house in the manner to which he was accustomed, and that if any maintenance needed done, they would sell off the terraced houses or the plots of land or whatever to keep the house and maintain that house. So within weeks, there was a guy, and it's again, I think, you talk about the universe and coincidences and synchronicities and stuff. It was a man from Ballymena that started this, and he operated he was involved in a church in Bangor, and he was a work colleague of Freddie Andrews Sr. He came into the house shortly after the burial, or around the time the dad died. The dad dropped dead 3 months before I was born, and this man walked into the house, and he goes into the office, and he comes out holding a piece of paper that they believe to be the will. And he shook it in the air and he says, "I'm going to take everything from you." And out you went. And then there was crooked solicitors, crooked barristers, thugs off the street coming, threatening the family, sign this, do that, all the different family members. They're being terrorised by this legal mafia. So the big sister took charge of it. And she basically took Freddie Andrews to Belfast High Court and made him a ward of the court. So when you're a ward of the court, which my stepson Aidan is, so I've had personal dealings with that, again, another coincidence. So when you're a ward of the court take complete and utter control of all of your finances. So if Maxine wanted to buy her son a pint of milk or an Xbox or whatever she wanted to do, she used her own money. She kept a receipt, and then she went in and handed in the receipt, and then they released the money. No money moves without permission of the court. So Freddie Andrews Jr. had all of his property being ring-fenced by the Royal Courts of Justice, £1.2 million worth of money. And all of the properties, all the terraced houses, the land at Castle Court and Tara House,
30 plus houses,
yes, was all stolen from a vulnerable, disabled man who had the protection of the court. And throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, and noughties, Eileen Wright was doing what I'm doing now, fighting against injustice and going. It was no podcast then, but it was in the Sunday World every week.
Let's elaborate a wee bit. When you say stolen, these properties were being taken from him.
There's no records of who owns the properties now, but the Freddie Andrews family said that their property was all stolen. They were shouting from the rooftops.
What do you mean? There's no land deeds? There's no exchange of owner? Well, it's the 70s. It's not 1900s. So
yes,
surely the people that have them now to show proof of ownership, they have the deeds, the land deeds.
Right, so the family alleged, right, so they documented everything. So you go on to, the website was www.
And now we have to be clear here. You were handed this. This is not all information that we know. We know it's common knowledge, but
so this is
alleged.
This is post-arrest of the judge.
Okay.
And someone hands me a packet. I start looking at it. It's very interesting, so I start reading into it. And this is the information I found out. So this family alleged that while Freddie Andrews Jr., a disabled, vulnerable male, was in the ward of the court, all of the property was took from them. They sold Tara House and put them in like a crappy house around the corner, and there was bad plumbing and all sort of stuff. And he remained there the rest of his life.
Okay. And
Tara House was taken by a dodgy solicitor, right? And that solicitor retained Tara House for 10 years. Approximately, it was 1987, I think it was. There was a police officer called Mervyn Patterson, and he was in the fraud squad in Belfast. And again, a coincidence. I think the age, say he was like 44 years old. he was a married constable in the police in Northern Ireland, and he had 2 children. When I found out about it, I was a married constable in the police service in Northern Ireland, married with 2 children, right? And so he was investigating it, and he basically came out, it was in Sunday World, and he was quoted as saying that there was a web of deceit in Belfast High Court and that he was going to arrest the people involved. And within a short space of time, then he said that he felt his life was in danger, and then he was found in Belfast North Shore with his hands tied behind his back, his feet tied together, shot in the back of the head, and no gun at the scene. And during the inquest, it was found that it was an elaborate suicide, and that he had tied his own feet, tied this wrist tightly, shot himself in the back of the head, had a bit of wood tied to the gun, and when the tide came in, it floated away and was never found. And then he put his hands behind, put it into the loop, and then lay down to die in order to embarrass the police.
How does somebody come up with that theory?
This is what the.
But seriously though, how does somebody come up with that theory?
I'm only listening to this, and I'm like, I ain't a cop, I ain't forensics, but I smell a bit of horse shit.
Right.
But this is taking a massive sinister turn. So now, from people fraudulently taking property to murder, there's a massive.
But during the 70s and 80s, coming on the news that a police officer was killed wasn't unusual news. So it sort of blended into the background of the Troubles, right? So this man died.
Do you believe he died as a direct response, or directly because he was linked to uncovering this web?
I believe there's enough questions about that it needs to be re-looked at. And I can't really comment. I don't know, because I know there's family members and stuff out there, know, that might even be listening to this here, and I don't want to drag it all up for them. But for me, there was a lot of people, a lot of speculation at that time that he was taken out.
Because
making that allegation.
Some of these are broad strokes that we've went from.
Very much
said that. They said that. So we'll just be clear that there. It's when you present some of these things in the thing, but it. Does it smell a wee bit to you? Does it smell funny?
I mean, as a police officer who should naturally be suspicious, there's something off about that, right? So the point I'm getting to is he died, and within 6 months, ownership of Tara House changed from the dodgy solicitor to a member of the legal profession in Northern Ireland.
Who did it change that? I
went to PRONI, the Public Records Office, Northern Ireland. Myself and one other person went there and searched through all the records, and we got the documents that prove who owns Tara House today. Who is that person?
I don't know.
The judge that I arrested.
I don't know where the story's going to go next.
Fucking
right.
I'm worried. Yeah. I'm fucking worried where we're going to go next. I ain't going fucking near the North Shore, I can tell you that. But right, okay, we're laughing because this is anything but funny, and now let's be careful on this. So we're drawing broad strokes again, but shit, we've come full circle.
Right, so I'm open and transparent. I'm not a part of any conspiracy. I didn't know about the Freddie Andrews story. Someone gave it to me after I arrested this judge for something that I believe was justified. These documents then painted this man in a different picture. So there's the police code of ethics. They say, at 1 o'clock in the morning, instead of taking that extra vodka and getting on the table and dancing, go home and be sensible. There's code of ethics and how you conduct yourself and what you get involved with, the people you spend time with, your circles, all that sort of stuff. Judges have got the Bangalore principles, okay? And it's literally a code of ethics for judges.
To be above reproach.
Beyond reproach. So
don't gamble.
Anybody
don't have any weaknesses.
What I'm going to say is, and I made this allegation, I said this in the public domain on Facebook, and I put all those documents. So all the documents that prove that Lord Justice John Gillen owns Tara House.
Well, let's just be careful.
He owns it. I'm not saying he stole it. I'm not making allegations against him.
So that's what I'm going to say. He could have very lawfully bought this house.
Right. What I'm saying is there's a document that I've got that proves that he is currently the owner, and he became the owner about 6 months after that police officer died. And I'm not saying that's connected. I'm just saying in a timeline that's what happened. Okay. So I put those documents out in the public domain, and I said, in relation to the Bangalore principles, it is highly, if me arresting a judge was a breach of the code of ethics, and they said that I breached this, that, and the other thing, that's why they sagged me for a breach of the code of ethics. If I breach the code of ethics by doing my job lawfully, as I say, what does someone owning a house that's even alleged to have been stolen from a vulnerable disabled man?
Right, okay. Let's be fair.
How many houses?
Let's be fair. I don't know who owned my house before I bought it. And
Yes.
a lot of people don't know who owns their house before when they go to the solicitor and they sit down and they exchange the deeds. That's the first moment.
Let me out, right. I'll just say this: in the 70s and 80s, almost every other Sunday in the Sunday world was this ongoing legal scandal about the Freddie Andrews story and all these allegations about stolen property. This police officer that was alleged to have been killed, or all this sort of stuff.
But now I'm only playing devil's advocate, but it could be argued that a judge, especially a high court judge, would not read papers so that it would not sway them one road or the other. They do not participate in media, and a lot of judges would have stated that they don't read newspapers for the simple reason is they don't partake in gossip, so they can't unconsciously bias. Now I'm playing devil's advocate because I feel that somebody handed you a load of gun here. I feel like that there's a lot. I googled after you just said this, and I read some of this, and it does. You're right. It needs answers, and they've called for public inquiries. What I am saying to you here now is, do you feel that somebody knew who owned that house and handed you the file because they were watching the judge, watching what happened with you, knowing that you and that judge had exchanged, you had history, documented, well-known, newspaper, on TV, they may have already known this information, drawed their dots themselves and says, right, here's this to you.
I can't speak for anybody else. All I know is that when I looked at it with fresh eyes, I had no agenda. I didn't even know where the conclusion was going. All I knew is that this was a legal scandal in Northern Ireland's history, and it was only by going to Prony that I found out who owned the house, and that blew my mind that it was the same judge. And again, I'll just go back to, is it of all the houses in Belfast that any judge could buy, or any member of the legal profession, the one that's been in the papers and is highly contentious. You know, if some scandal happens in a police office or police station, every peeler in every station in the country knows about it. The gossip, everyone knows about it. A scandal of that nature could not have escaped a judge or any of the barristers. What I'm saying is that under the Bangalore principles, is it appropriate for him to have a house that's even alleged to have been stolen from a vulnerable disabled man? If someone's convicted of a crime of stealing, they get slapped around the wrist and they get whatever sentence they get. If the person has got a position of control, say they're a carer, and they go into someone's house and they steal from the person that they're in charge of, because of that conflict of interest and because they were a carer and stuff, they get a worse sentence because that person was vulnerable and disabled, and they were supposed to be looking after them. So the fact that Freddie Andrews was a vulnerable disabled man and that this was stolen from him while his finances were ring-fenced in the court, and then for a judge to own that house later on, that for me stinks. I'm not saying he was involved in the theft, but I don't think it's appropriate for a judge to even own that house. And there's a whole lot of questions there.
I would say, first and foremost, if you're right, and if it was known that there was contention over the house, but, and I'm only saying what people are here thinking, because people may be thinking, right, well, there was no investigation, there was no crime in the eyes of the law. There,
where did his properties go?
I know, but what I mean is there's no alleged crime. Is there a reported alleged crime? Has there been an investigation? What I'm saying to you is, if there was no investigation, and now I googled the Freddie Andrews thing, and you want to read some of the comments, and it's all a lot of smoke if there's no fire. Do you know what I mean? There has to be something in it. But what I'm saying, I'm playing devil's advocate here because you haven't made the accusation.
No.
But you have pointed towards not an accusation, but you've pointed towards that he is now in ownership of, and I don't know this, Judge, and I have no opinion on this, and just what you're presenting is the knowledge that you know. We don't know this to be factual, we don't know this to be thing. We're only giving our view on this conversation. But it's a big stone to throw, and this man could have, I bought property. I don't know who owned it. I don't know 20 years ago what happened to it. I don't know. And now you're saying he should know, but what I'm saying is he may not know. So it's a big stone to throw. It stinks because I've read about that, and I'm if aware of that, you would know to stay clear. It's not something you want involved in.
Yeah.
But it's not the first.
To move back then, to get back on track, whenever I was sent the email to say they're going to deal with the issue of costs back to where we were, my response and I've never let up, was I come back and I said, I don't consent to deal with the judge who's currently on the run according to PACE legislation. He was arrested, but he was never interviewed or charged or anything else, so he remains on the run. So for those reasons, I don't consent to him dealing with it. I'll deal with a different judge. And plus, he owns a house that's alleged to have been stolen at the centre of the Freddie Andrews story. And I gave all the documents. And I went into the Royal Courts of Justice and I addressed a hand-delivered document to the Lord Chief Justice, Declan Morgan. And I handed it in and I got a receipt and I have a copy of it. And I made them aware of it for those two reasons, because of the even a suggestion of his credibility or his reputation or his ethics or whatever else over him, plus the fact that he was arrested. I said, I'm not going to deal with him. The Lord Chief Justice office replied to me and answered the stuff about me arresting him and didn't even comment on the Freddie Andrews story. I was sent a document, it was a Freedom of Information request that was sent to the PSNI about the Freddie Andrews story investigation, and the answer came back and it says, the PSNI cannot confirm or deny the existence of any investigation into Freddie Andrews story, blah blah blah. We're not
50
saying
years, is it? Aye.
It's still being covered up.
Aye, so
there was no investigation into it.
What is it? You're allowed after 50 years, so if it's 78, is another 4 or 5 years before you can...
Don't know. But I'm just saying, for me, I mean, again, I'm going to use a completely different set of circumstances to draw a comparison. So there's a Bank of Scotland versus Ray case in the High Court. And basically, there's a thing called capitalisation, where the bank charges interest and then charges interest on interest. And it's like a snowball going down a hill. It gathers. The more the interest goes up, the more your payments go up. And it's capitalisation. It was discovered in the Bank of Scotland versus Ray case. The Attorney General that put me in prison came out and he openly accused Bank of Scotland of fraud in relation to that offence, right? And that he was doing an investigation. So he took that investigation. So everybody in the background that's getting repossessed by Bank of Scotland are holding their fingers, hoping something comes out of it. And then at one point, the Attorney General handed the investigation to the PSNI. So I know a friend of mine that's fighting Bank of Scotland for repossession. He was using the fact of this Bank of Scotland versus Ray capitalisation, investigation, whatever, in his case, awaiting the outcome. So he emailed the police and says, I'm also a victim of Bank of Scotland capitalisation. Can you tell me the status of your investigation? What was the reply? The PSNI do not confirm or deny the existence of any investigation into the Bank of Scotland. So they were given it, an accusation of fraud by the Attorney General was given to the police, and it's just disappeared. It's not been investigated.
But do you know that? That statement doesn't say that it has. It's not.
No, but I've seen it.
I know it sounds like a fob off, but
right.
What I'm saying is not confirming and not denying is exactly what it says. They are not denying that they are investigating.
Right. So again, it comes back to the whole subject of public interest. Are there thousands of people out there that are being repossessed and evicted by the Bank of Scotland? Yes, there are. And do some of them involve capitalisation? So this man claimed that his house was capitalised and that was a key part of his defence. And as a victim of Bank of Scotland, he wanted to be updated about a crime. And the police wouldn't update him. Like, there's something that stinks for me, like.
So we're back in court, dealing with a cause,
yes.
And you're not being dealt with other than through emails.
Yeah, so it was down to the emails.
And it's 2017 now.
It's 2017.
Yeah.
So I sent in this document to the Lord Chief Justice, making him aware that the second highest judge in Northern Ireland owned a property that had a big cloud over it, and I didn't think that was appropriate. And for those reasons, I didn't want to deal with them. They replied and just said that they replied about stuff about the arrest and said it was nonsense and whatever. So that judge was dealing with it. We went through that process by email, and then he awarded costs against me, right, which Santander just lumped onto my mortgage.
What sort of what figure are we at now?
I think we're sitting there at the minute, and I was just brainstorming it with my friend there, but I think 30 grand in arrears. So if I could magically give them 30 grand, even to put into an escrow account in the court to be held in limbo until it's dealt with, and then start paying my mortgage, all of their litigation would just fall away, and the only thing would be standing is my writ against them. There you go. So anyway, so we're sitting 30
If any of yous out here with 32s are willing to gamble against Santander, hit them up. We're belittling, we're joking, but obviously it's a very serious matter. They've ruled against you.
Yes.
So they're obviously going to issue a repossession order. Is this the next step?
Right, so that's the way it was heading. So basically, when in 2018, a new judge was appointed, female judge. And I went in, and from the minute I met her, just found she wasn't professional. She would try and belittle me. She tried to get me into a conversation in court where she was wanting me to divulge what happened when I arrested the judge, so if I could have a laugh at my expense, you know. And I was trying to deal with an issue and asking her questions. She goes, no, Mr. Carlin, tell me, what was that incident you're talking about? And she kept belittling me. And I just found her to be a horrendous human being.
Now, I'm going to ask you this here, Anthony, because some of the theatrics came in and some of it, so when you started, you proved that Santander was lying. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the credibility of what you were saying had some grounds.
Yes.
Then you were ruled against. You were in your police uniform, your Guantanamo Bay. So some of the theatrics have come in the interviews and all and stuff like that. So some of it has descended a wee bit into like a sideshow, not for you, but so the judges are now aware of this, and it's been a conversation. Yes. You are the police officer that attempted in their eyes to arrest a judge and went to prison, refused to apologise. So some of the sideshow has now taken centre stage here. And it doesn't derail the serious issue of what you have in hand. But what I'm saying is some of us gathered, obviously, momentum.
Yes.
So this judge looking to know this, and they've got their back up. And I don't care what anyone says. The human nature weighs somebody up straight away. They have a preconceived idea. They've viewed you. They've viewed the previous notes. And the judges are allowed to view previous notes from things because it leads to the character and the situation. And they're seeing this now as the rule with Santander. They're believing that you're doing this as a distraction, as a delay, or whatever they're saying it is. But you have now entered in with a new judge. You're on a bad foot, and you knew you were going to be on a bad foot, and it would have been a hard day before you got somebody to come inside of you, and their boss, the top dog, and you've went at it.
He put me in jail.
So you were on the back foot, no matter who showed up or rocked up.
That's right.
So you're in there now, and you're getting the undercurrent, you're getting the tone that this is going the same way.
She made it very clear from the start, I'm setting this for a trial. Yep. Straight away, and a whole lot of evidence was still outstanding, a whole lot of things had to be done, set processes that are set, and the practice directions and stuff had to be followed. But she was adamant, this trial's going to happen on this date and nothing's going to stop it. So I was entitled to certain legal facilities. One of them is discovery. So I'm allowed to put my grubby hand in their cookie jar of documents and take so there's discovery, which is just general, and then for specific documents you need, you do specific discovery. So I went through that process, and that took 2 years. So that trial of the matter had to be postponed, and she really wasn't happy that it was being postponed. I went into specific discovery for 2 years. I was looking for 56 different classes of documents, and really there's a whole lot of them there. There was 5 classes of documents that I really needed more than anything else. Okay, and as we went through the discovery process, all the stuff that didn't matter as much, but what I still wanted to see, was given to me freely. And when it came down to it, the 5 that I really needed was the 5 that they weren't given to me. So when it came down to the trial, it was a 2-day after like a year and a half of that trial. A year and a half of litigation. It came down to a trial, and during the trial, I've got the transcript right there. What it came down to was, the mysterious payments of 192 grand that came in and went out and stuff. So I asked Santander, where did the money come from? Where did it go? What did you do with it? How much money did you make? All those questions. And they provided a screenshot of a computer screen. So if you take a screenshot of your Mac or your PC, it's exactly how it looks on the screen, the bright colours and everything else, and you can see everything clearly. They gave me this black and white, grainy, heavily redacted document. You couldn't make it out. Like, there's like one wee part I could see. So in the rules of the court, and namely, I think it's Order 45 in relation to evidence. If evidence isn't clear for you to see and read, you're entitled to see the original. So I argued to the judge successfully that the original of a screenshot's a screen. So I'm entitled to go and see their computers, and their computers at their head office. So I'll sign whatever disclaimers and non-disclosures, whatever you need to do, and I'll behave myself. And I'm always, apart from arresting the judge, I have never put a foot wrong in that court. I'm always respectful and everything else. So I says, look, of course I'll behave myself, but I need to go and see those documents. The judge agreed. And what he said to the barrister was, I will make it clear, and I can't make it any clearer. Mr. Carlin is entitled to see those documents. And so I'm going to, and if you don't permit him to see the documents of your own volition, then I mind it to make an order compelling us to. Right, I'm paraphrasing there, but that's what he said. I've got the audio and every word's been typed out, and I've got it there highlighted and stuff. And then the barrister concerned, he replied verbatim, basically says, it's crystal clear. I will explain to my client that we have to consider letting Mr. Carlin see these documents, and if we don't do it, you're minded to give an order. He replied it back, so he understood clearly. So then it was left that they had to give an affidavit. So they had to, at the end of that there was a Scott schedule list of all the documents they had to give me. Half of them they were given to me, some of them didn't exist, and the other ones blah, 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 but there was a list drawn up of what they had to give me. And they had to answer the question whether they would or would not let me see the screen. Plus, there was I think 4 parked issues, one of which was the Banker's Book of Evidence application. There was 3 or 4 other key issues. So basically it was left that they were going to do an affidavit, and then the parked issues were going to be dealt with, and their decision whether they were or were not going to let me see the screen would be dealt with. So I was waiting for it. The affidavit appeared. So that this barrister in question that I now allege fraud against, he, under the instructions of the judge, he was told to draw up the specific discovery order. So he had his hand on it, and it wasn't his acts, it was his omissions. It wasn't what he put down, but what he failed to put down. He made no mention of the parked issues. He made no mention of any of those things. That was just left in the court. So there was an order drawn up for specific discovery. They responded. They gave all the documents they were supposed to give, and then they just said, in relation to Mr. Carlin seeing the documents, we don't want to set a dangerous precedent, so basically he's not seeing the documents. So the next natural thing is we go back into court and he gives an order. So in the meantime, the solicitor for the firm sends an email to the Chancery Court and says, we have now fully complied with discovery. Discovery is over. Mr. Carlin has received the affidavit. Can we refer it to another judge to set a date for a trial?
To another judge?
Yes. So move away from discovery. There's a special court for discovery. Let's go back into the same female judge that I was dealing with before. Get it back into her court and set it for trial. So she omitted to include me in the email. So it was sent from the solicitor's firm to the judges. I wasn't made aware of it.
Do you need to be?
Yes. Openness and transparency. Otherwise, it's ex parte. Ex parte is one person goes to the judge and the other party doesn't come in. It's ex parte. So they sent an ex parte email.
So when they asked for a movement to finish discovery,
yes,
you should have been included in that.
Absolutely. So they're
and have they alleged that you were?
So let me explain this here. So she sent an email. Then 4 days later, she sent another email. She didn't include me in that as well. So that's for me is mens rea. Mens rea in law means guilty mind. That she was up to something. She didn't include me twice. Second email was, is there any word? Let's get this moved. I think she was panicking. She sent a second email. And then the court replied to her and CC'd me in. And that's when I was first aware of it. So I have steam coming out of my ears. So I wrote a big email saying discovery is not over. The master's 5 parked issues. There's the issue of these seeing the screens and And under no circumstances move court. I need to see the other judge urgently. And in 13 years of litigation, that is the only email that was ever quarantined by the court's firewall. It never got through. So I contacted her on the Monday morning and said to her about the email. She looked and says there's no emails. I'm the only person who looks at this email address. And so I resent it. And she says a window just come up on my screen and says that your email's just been blocked by the firewall. So the first email and that second one was both blocked. So I copied and pasted it into a different email address and emailed it to her, and she got it. She read it, and then she says, I'm sorry, but the decision's already been made and it's been moved court. And I'm saying, but you can't do that. If one party's saying it needs to be moved and the second party agrees, then admin staff can move it. If one party's saying it needs to be moved and the other one's saying adamantly no, it's back to the judge. He's the one in charge. But that admin staff made the decision to move courts. So she says, raise your issues with this next judge. So I go into the next judge and I start telling her all the stuff that they're misleading the court and that discovery is not over and there's these 5 issues and blah, 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 blah. And she just ignored everything I said. It says, so I gave a sworn affidavit and I gave documents and evidence and everything else, and I swore in the Bible this was true. The barrister stood there. It was over a couple of hearings, but basically he said, as far as my client's concerned, discovery is over. And I've got a transcript there where he said, remember he agreed, he verbatim replied what the judge said, so he knew it was going on, but his representations to the judge was the complete opposite, right? So I'll take a different analogy. You go into court for a speeding ticket. People are going to go into court and they're going to tell porcupines and try and get off with it. And that's to be expected, right? To a certain level. But if you go into court for a speeding ticket and the police officer lies and they're caught lying, that's a whole different kettle of fish. The officials can't lie. They can't mislead the court. They have to be brutally honest. So I've got a senior or a barrister here who's been a barrister for a long time lying to the court. And he would never give a sworn affidavit.
If you have a barrister lying, he's disbarred.
So if a barrister's going in there, they have to tell the absolute truth. So what happened was he, at no stage has the solicitors that are acting for Santander now ever given a sworn affidavit in relation to this. So what happened was they went in and they the barrister, so the solicitor acts for Santander and they appoint a barrister, and the barrister can speak in court, but the solicitor can't. So the way the rules work, right? So the barrister's, he's saying discovery's over. And I'm saying, but it's not, it's clearly not, and you know that it's not, and you're misleading the court here. So in my mind, policeman sat back on, he's perverting the course of justice. Or is it contempt of court? Or is it, you know what I'm saying? There's any, if you allege a criminal offence, then it throws a spanner in the works, so you can use like civil fraud or civil deceit, or you can use other terms for it, but it's the same actions and the same thing, but you just have to be careful how you word it. So I'm alleging fraud by Santander and their legal team in order to stop me getting documents that are tied directly to the subject matter for which the case was kicked out in 2013. So they lied about that then, and now they're actually, they're so scared of me seeing these documents. And I honestly believe that if I was to get that information and the Banker's Book of Evidence, it would just expose this.
What do you think's in the Banker's Book? What do you think you're going to get?
I think that the banks, I've already argued this here, and that Professor Werner was on the Rush Today programme. Banks don't lend money when you take out a mortgage. It's created out of thin air. There's I'll just make reference, you maybe play it when you edit this out, but it's Godfrey Bloom talking to the European, and the European, the politics in Europe. Yeah. He's speaking to them and he's talking about all the banks being bankrupt and all the shenanigans they're up to. And it's a very, very, it's only like a 2-minute clip talking about how bad the banks are. I'm in court. It's very apparent to me that this barrister is lying to the judge in order to cause to create a gain for him and a loss for me. We're back into the Fraud Act again. Yeah. So I give sworn affidavit and all the evidence and everything else, and the judge then asked the barrister, what do you think? And he says, as far as we're concerned, it's all over. And she was, well, I believe him. She ignored the facts and evidence and a sworn affidavit over his oral testimony. But what he did was he gave in, it's called, as a specific name, I've never seen it before. It's like a status report or something like that it's called. I've got it in the bag there. And it basically outlines what he said, and it's not signed and it's not sworn. Because if you swear something under an oath and it's a lie, it's perjury. So they cannot do a sworn affidavit or sign anything. So he gave this status report and he outlined stuff, and in that he says that discovery is over. So the judge took him at his word, and then she set it up for trial. So they're setting a trial in December 2019, and they're dragging me down this road to go to it. I'm trying to get back to the discovery judge to get the evidence in relation to securitization and these dodgy payments and stuff like that there, and stuff that I was entitled to, the Banker's Book of Evidence application, all of that stuff. And they must have been scared of what I was trying to get so much that they were prepared to commit fraud in order to protect that information, right? So the whole time I'm kicking and screaming, so to speak, putting in applications, paying £151 for this application, and the judge just dismisses it. So I went into court, and this is one of the greatest miscarriages of justice that I experienced in 13 years of litigation in the High Court. So we go in, I've paid £151 out of my Christmas money to make this application. I'll go into court, and I said to that judge, so it was like an hour and a half one day, and then seeing the next day, and then the third day it had to be adjourned and stuff. Over those 3 days, I must have asked that judge about a dozen times, Your Honour, I've paid for this application, and all I'm looking for is for you to allow me 5 to 10 minutes of speaking uninterrupted so that I can explain the purposes of the application I made. And I've paid for this application, so I'm entitled to speak. So I start speaking, and then she interrupts me. And she goes, oh, that guy, man beside you, is he your Mackenzie friend? And I says, you mean David, the person who's been my Mackenzie friend for the last 10 years that the court's well aware of? Yes, has he made an application to the court to be your Mackenzie friend? And I was like, why is this becoming an issue now when I've asked you not to interrupt me? And it's irrelevant. He's been here for this whole time. Oh, but Mr. Carlin, this Mackenzie friend is very important. And made this big song and dance, was wanting him to fill out a form and give his personal information. He starts cracking up and all because he's dealing with other cases and getting a hard time from them. So the bottom line was, we're out in the corridor and he's getting emotional. And I says, look, David, just calm it down. I says, either fill out the form and sit beside me, or don't fill out the form and go and sit at the back and I'll continue. But let's not argue. I says, they're trying to separate us here and get us all emotional and stuff. So he says, look, I can't sign it. So I said, that's fine. So I go back to the front of the court. Judge comes out. She goes, well, Mr. Carlin, what's your decision? And I says, because of the actions of the court, I now have no representation. I've got no Mackenzie friend because he doesn't want to fill out the form. I says, so I'm going to continue. I says, now, can I please speak for 5 to 10 minutes, uninterrupted, and explain to the court what's going on? Yes, go ahead. Barrister jumps up within a minute. Madam Justice, there's someone at the back and they're taking notes. So there's someone at the back scribbling in the book. Who's taking notes into this big galder? And the man was sitting there and he was just, his face was beetroot like, and she started shouting at him and all this sort of stuff. And that took about 25 minutes of her. She had to go out the back, print out the practice direction on note taking, and then bring it in and slowly read through the whole thing. And at the end of it, she says, so therefore it's down to my discretion. And on this occasion, I will permit it. And I'm sitting there. I was just like Gandalf. I had this big long beard just sitting waiting like. And what was very apparent was that the barrister and the judge had an ex-party meeting. They met up, whether it was by email, phone call, whatever else, and they agreed what they were going to do that day in court. And I'm convinced of that. And they just played out a theatre that they were going to frustrate all my efforts. So after the second day, I decided I was going to recuse the judge. So if you recuse the judge, you're kicking them off the case. You're telling them that they no longer have any credibility or that they're not impartial enough and that you don't have any trust in their being able to preside over the case. So I done all my research into a recusal application. I put the document together overnight, and then I go into court the next day. I go to first thing in the morning, 9:30, go into the solicitor's office, get it sworn in the Bible, over into the court, up into the office, you go up in and they stamp it. So I have 3 copies, stamped, sworn, signed, legal documents, an application to recuse that judge from my case. It mentions the Bangalore principles. I went through the Bangalore principles and I'm saying you're in breach of 1A, 1B, C3. I went through the whole Bangalore principles and all of her actions were in breach of all of that. How she conducted herself was unbelievable what she did. So I'm sitting with this application in front of me and it's sitting on the desk in front of me. And again, I'm calm, I'm reserved, and I'm giving her another chance. So I'm saying, again, for the third day, all I'm looking for is for 5 or 10 minutes uninterrupted for this application I've paid for. And then she interrupted me again. And then he interrupted me again. And I actually made, what I said in court that day, for me, was cheeky enough that she could have put me in jail for frigging contempt of court. I said, it's absolutely disgusting, the behaviour in this court. I said, it's very clear that you're working in collaboration with this barrister, and it's both of your intentions to put me off and stop me making these applications to get it back to the discovery court. I says, you're frustrating my efforts. I says, you may as well have a sign in this court. There used to be signs, I thought it was in America, that says no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. I says, you may as well have a sign in this court saying no lay litigants. That's the level of discrimination you're showing against me right now, and it's disgraceful. I says, and I reached for the thing, and I says, I'm now recusing you from this case. You're not fit to stand over it. And whatever it was I said, and then at that point, she jumped up and she ran out of the court. So I went over to the clerk of the court. Now, I'm looking at body language and stuff. You know, the police officer, you're watching body language for someone coming at you. The G4S staff are standing like that there. You know, they're sitting going, like, what's going on here? This is disgraceful. This man's being polite. He's communicating well. He's articulate. He's asking for a simple thing. And this whole freaking drama's going on to frustrate his efforts. So I went up to the clerk of the court. That's the person that sits at the front typing and stuff. And I went up and I looked him in the eye and I says, look, I don't want to get you in trouble. Are you happy to accept this recusal application? And he goes, Mr. Carlin, no problem at all. Took it off me, went and served it on the judge. He just walked away and that was it when she was served. And then I went over and I served it in Santander. So this was a recusal application making like really serious allegations about judicial impropriety. Like that's completely, it's like a police officer being drunk walking down the street shooting in the air sort of thing. You know, it's disgraceful what she done. So I put in that recusal application. Then I get an email to say it was adjourned to the following morning. So I went in the following morning and she came out and she sits down and she goes, "Now, Mr. Carlin, yes, I believe we adjourned it yesterday so that you could make a decision about the Mackenzie friend." And I says, "No, we dealt with that issue and my Mackenzie friend's now stood back and I don't have legal representation. The reason it was adjourned yesterday was because I recused you from the case." And she goes, "Oh yes, Miss," she said the name of the barrister. "What was that thing you were telling me earlier on, which indicates that they were speaking?" And he says, "Oh yes, Madam Justice, the conveyancing solicitor that did Mr. Carlin's mortgage, apparently you know her." And she goes, "Yes, that was it. Miss Hannah, the conveyancing solicitor, is a personal friend of mine."
She recused herself.
And she says, "And because of that, it's a conflict of interest. So because of that, I can't take this matter to trial. So I'm going to recuse myself, but not for the reasons you said." Stood up, walked out. Despicable.
Now, a lot of stuff you've thrown about has been broad strokes. That's a bit...
Like, honest to God, like I'm sitting there.
Because that appears on her record if it was ruled that she was recused. If she self-recuses, it's not seen the same way. Is that
right,
correct?
So history is written by the conquerors. So whenever I refer back to that now, they said, "Oh yes, Madam Justice McBride had a conflict of interest, so she recused herself." I've got the recusal application. I've got the audio, and I'm now trying to do the transcripts so that I can highlight it all. Because of my ADHD, I do better with written than I do for audio. So I want the written form. I asked the judge today in court, would he get the court typist to do it so that it's impartial and I don't have to sit for 6 weeks every day, all day, listening to the audio typing without the proper equipment and stuff. And he's refused it. Again, that's what's going on. So that happened. She recused herself and then moved to a different judge. Different judge, male judge, went into him and he would let me speak for as long as I wanted and then go, "No." And that's all he did. Every application I made, all the references to the discovery, the stuff I wasn't entitled to, and I made that big a song and dance about it. He goes, "Right, give me a list of the documents you think you're entitled to." And I says, the master that did discovery stated that I was entitled to them, plus there's 5 park issues that are central to my defence. It's the most important part of my case. What are they? So I listed the 5 of them in an email, and then he relitigated it. And he just went, "Nah, you don't need that, don't need that, don't need that, don't need that." Right, that's it, dealt with. You don't need that stuff. So then he just kicked it out. Every application I made, he kicked out. So then I says, "Right, interrogatories." After this, so there's discovery, specific discovery, then interrogatories, so you get to interrogate the other side. Now I've got all your documents. I need you to answer these questions. So I gave them, I had 114 questions. They asked them. The female judge at one point made me give them the questions, even though it was out of sequence. I had them ready and all, but she directed me to give them to them. They still have never answered them. And whenever I asked her to tell them to answer the questions, she says, "Go and make an application." And I says, "What do you mean go and pay for it? Pay another £151. I'm self-employed, or I'm an unemployed father of 2 kids. And you want me to..." So I went and paid for the application. And then she said, "No." Just every application I made between her and this second judge, as we went through the whole thing, it became apparent that they were just shoehorning me into a trial in December of 2019. And all the applications I was making, I was asking for interrogatories. And he says, I made a song and dance about that. And he went, "Just ask them at the case in December." Then I made another application, paid for it. And he went, "I'll just do that in December." And they just kept shooing everything into this case. And it was set for a 2-day trial. And it's like £10 a shite in a £20 or a £5 bag. There was too much that needed to be done for a 2-day trial. So basically, I got to the stage where my Mackenzie friends sat and going, this is like a miscarriage of justice. This is unbelievable that they're in breach of this practice direction, this rule, this legislation. He can articulate he can tell you the page in the book that it's in the rules of the court. And he was jumping up and down. Like he loses his emotions. And I just had a moment of clarity and I says, "Look, David, it doesn't matter what we do. Every application I've made, I've just tried, honestly, to try and get it back into the discovery judge. It's quite clear that there's the current's taking us the other way. If I waste, I've only got a certain amount of weeks to prepare for a trial. If I waste those weeks putting in application after application and having the money to do that. If I do that, they're just going to turn them down, and I'd have run down the clock and not have time to get prepared for the trial. So I had to yield to that. I could have put in complaints about the female judge. I was so overwhelmed with all the litigation stuff in my head. It's just litigation overload. And I should have done that, and then the judges now will point back and say, but you should have put in just a simple application. You should have done this, and you should have done that, and they make it sound that simple and easy. But when you're in the thick of that, the rounds are firing in all around you, and it's all crazy. You can't concentrate. So basically, I prepared for the trial. We went into that trial, and like I'm not egotistical or anything else, but I reckon we beat them like 90-10. I pummeled the life out of them. I got Miss Hannah to admit that whenever I signed, you take out the mortgage and you go in and sign the deeds. So you go in and sign the deeds, and then they tell you not to sign it, not to date it. So they go and do their whatever it is for pull the whole thing together, and then the solicitor puts the date on it. And I got her to admit that she changed the date on my document. So there's a thing called, try to think of the name of it, I'll come to me in a second, Piggott's Law. So Piggott's Law, it works in England, but in Northern Ireland, they brought in legislation that nullifies it. And Piggott's Law says that if you have a contract, so we sit here this minute in time, we make a contract, and there's the terms and conditions about what we're trying to achieve and everything, what we agree to. I sign it, you sign it, you sign it, you're a witness. And it is dated. That's a final document. Piggott's Law says that if later on in 2 years' time someone puts an X on it, they have defaced an instrument and it's now null and void. You cannot deface an instrument. That's Piggott's Law. The legislation in Northern Ireland has done away with that. And anyone defacing an instrument or altering a contract, I'm talking tip-Xing it out and changing dates so that you can, just criminality. Piggott's Law is designed to prevent criminality, and legislation in Northern Ireland has now nullified it. So they say Piggott's Law doesn't apply. So I'm saying this solicitor, it's institutionalised mortgage fraud. If a solicitor alters a document outside, she didn't ask my permission, she didn't inform me she was doing it, nothing about it, but she defaced that document. So under Piggott's Law, the case should be struck out.
What did she gain from that?
I'm not saying it is standard. If I had went to 100 solicitors would have done it. But the Piggott's Law is Piggott's Law. I'm just saying it's so crazy for me that it just doesn't apply in Northern Ireland.
But it's more technicality.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that's one argument. And is it a valid argument, and does it have law behind it and case law? And the answer is yes, and that's what works in court. That's one argument. But that was, so I then got, there's the girl that does she's like the accounts manager for Santander, a girl, Melissa. It was her that provided the information to the solicitor in Belfast around the lie in the affidavit. So one of them put the bullet in the gun and the other one pulled the trigger. But together, it was a combined effort. So she provided that. So I argued the whole way through that she wasn't a competent person because she already provided incorrect information that resulted in the first case being kicked out and whatever. So she was allowed to continue. I cross-examined her, got her to admit that she had no qualifications in accounting or economics or anything else. She had no experience. She couldn't explain certain things. I cross-examined her on the listings document, these mysterious payments. Where did that come from? Where did the money come from when I borrowed money from Santander? You say you lent me money. I'm saying you didn't. And Professor Richard Werner has given an affidavit backing me up and a peer-reviewed an empirical study and stuff. So the creation of money, whether they lent me money or not, and the securitization, I was cross-examining her, and I gave her a hard time, and I got some really good answers out of her, and facts that she wasn't qualified, and she wasn't qualified to be standing there. It should have been like the head of Treasury Legal or something, somebody much more qualified than her. And the second person I cross-examined was Thomas Ranger. Santander has got one treasurer, Thomas Ranger, and I cross-examined him in Belfast High Court. And like I'm a constable. I'm just a scrote from Ballymena, do you know what I mean? And I'm punching so far above my weight. And I tried my best, but I cross-examined him for like 2 hours. And all I wanted to do was I wanted him to commit to his story. And so he's taken an oath. So when I question him, that's in the public record, and if he says something that I can later prove as a lie, then he's contempt of court and whatever else. So he stood in court and he said that he didn't know what a note was. A note, so it's a promissory note. And so he stood and said that in America, if you've got a mortgage deed and it's been separated from the promissory note that is involved in every mortgage, that mortgage is unenforceable. And so, whereas countries have got borders and stuff, the economic world has no borders. It's the same process all throughout the world. But yet in America, all these cases have been kicked out because the prom note and the deeds have been separated. In the UK, there's no mention of the prom note. So I've got Santander documents. A Santander document was from a US website, but it's talking about promissory notes written by Santander. And I've got the treasurer of Santander going, what's a promissory note? Like first year students at university know what a prom note is. And he's standing there, he was lying to the court.
What way did it go?
So we went through the whole process. The case was over. We all came out on the last day. Like the judge, during the last day of the hearing, I was asking for a banker's book of evidence. And it was dangerous territory. And I said to him, I want to make a formal application, do it in written form. And he says, do it now in front of me. He says, I want you to sum up this case and then make your application in front of me. And I says, I am mentally drained. I am not able to, I didn't know that stage I had ADHD, but I literally couldn't function. And he's shouting at me. He was shouting at members of the public to sit down and shut up and all of this really bad behaviour. But he was trying to force me to do something that I wasn't able to do. And he says, if I need to keep you here till 10 o'clock tonight, I'll be doing it. And I says, right, so you're already breaching me Article 6 as the European Charter on Human Rights, Article 6 right to fair trial. I says, so not only are you breaching me Article 6 right to fair trial, you're now breaching me Article 8 right to private and family life. My children are in childcare at the minute, and I have to leave here to go and collect them, and you're going to hold me here and prevent me from going to my kids. I says, I'm going outside and I'm taking legal advice. I didn't ask his permission. I just got up and walked out of the court. I says, I'm going to come back, but I'm going to get legal advice. And I went out and made a 20-minute phone call. And when I come back in, his red mist had settled, and he calmed right down. And he went from saying, you can't have this and you can't have that, and you must do this and must do that, to asking me what I wanted. And I says, I want 14 days to put a banker's book of evidence application together and to summarise, do me summing up of my entire case. And they agreed to all that. So I put it all into him. And then if I paid £151 for a banker's book of evidence application, when I put that in, you're entitled to a trial. He seen the application and just went, no. Didn't give me a trial. Didn't listen to my documents. The other side didn't get to respond. They didn't argue. He just said no. So when he did that, then I appealed his decision. And I went into the court. I was out of money. It was Christmas time, 23rd of December. I went into the court and I says, look, there's an ER1 form. You can fill it out if you're on the dole or whatever, and they pay for it. But you give them the documents, and the ER1 form, they process that. And when it's processed, then they stamp the documents. You come back and collect them and go and serve them. So to this day, that ER1 has never been processed, and those documents have never been heard. And my application to appeal his decision. So once I appeal the judge's decision, it goes to a different court, different judge, and he rules whether that was lawful or not. The judge that made that decision blocked that and stopped me from having an appeal. It still was never heard. So I think I'm very fair and balanced and reasonable when I say that the court is doing everything they can possibly do to prevent me from getting a banker's book of evidence application. It's extremely unfair.
So COVID hit, then you had time. So where are you at now? Where does that bring you up to?
He gave a possession order in June 2020. Within 5 months, my wife left. Marriage was over. It was too much pressure. So that was the final coffin, the final nail in the coffin. So I'm then a single parent. COVID hit. There was a break. I needed a break. Like my central nervous system was just on fire. I just needed time to chill out and be away from litigation and settle down the kids, because mum had left. It was a big change for us, and I had to sort of get everything in order and get used to doing the house myself and all the domestics and stuff like that there, and trying to manage money and whatever. And so then 4 months ago, I get a letter from Santander, and it says we're now going to enforce the repossession. Right now, timeliness wise, there's applications I could or should have made. My head was frazzled. You couldn't even contact the court because there's no staff. You know, the whole COVID thing, the whole world was weird. So I just did nothing and tended to my family and looked after my kids and tried to get my life back in order. So then they start trying to take the house off me. So I put in an objection to this via the EJO, the Enforcement Judgments. It's the bailiffs in Northern Ireland. It's a wing of the court. And in their legislation, it says that all parties, there's actually legislation, a specific legislation for them that says all parties must be notified. So if there's two people, even they're split up, and the house is going to be evicted, both of them have to be legally served.
Yeah.
So they were sending the letters for my ex-wife to my house. So I jumped on the car, drove to Belfast, handed it in, returned to sender. She doesn't live here. And she's not speaking to me, and I don't know her address. And that's genuine, like. But I got a receipt to prove that they weren't serving her. And I said, look, you should have to go and get her and serve her. And so then they kept sending the letters to my house. So I got to the stage, I couldn't afford the diesel. So I was just putting in a recorded delivery and sending them back to them. So I have proof that Maxine was never served. And they went through this whole process. And at the end of it, basically, EJO's baby court and the High Court's daddy court. The EJO have got a very narrow bandwidth, and they only can deal with certain things. They can't deal with the issues in the court. They can only deal with certain things. So Santander were trying to enforce the eviction, and I said that they couldn't do it. I put in an application. I asked for an adjournment so I could put in an application to daddy court, go back in to start arguing this stuff. And within the specified time, I did that. And I showed her the document. There's the application, there's the stamp, there's the date, there's everything else. And then she found against me. She dismissed my objection, which gave the bailiffs permission to come to my door. But she says, I'm going to pause that for 7 days. But my hearing was listed on the 7th day. So when I go into daddy court, the first thing I'm asking for is a stay of enforcement. And I'm going to set aside the judgment in 2020. So if the judge grants me a stay, which he did, then the bailiffs can't come to my house. But on day 5, the bailiff landed at my door in contravention of the directions of the court. So I put in a complaint. I went down, handed in their documents and all that stuff again. So I went through the process of looking at the EJO, and I found them to be extremely unfair. And dealing with like 3 or 4 other people that I know, it's the same modus operandi. They don't serve all the parties. And when you object to it, they just go, well, whatever, as far as we're concerned, they're served, but they're not served. You know, and it's very, very important that they follow the rules. If they don't follow the rules, how can they expect us to? So went through the process of the EJO. I then appealed her decision. I put in an application to set aside the judgment of the judge that gave the possession order. I put in a notice of motion asking for certain things to motion the court to take action in relation to the Banker's Book of Evidence application. Certain things are okay. And then my 4th application was a writ against Santander, the current solicitor, the barrister, the solicitor's firm, the barrister and the solicitor, individually, all 4 of them named, for fraud, which I can prove and I have documents for. So in the middle of all that, I get diagnosed with ADHD. And it's about the flow of information and what I can take in and understand. If I'm being overwhelmed or there's noise in the background and stuff, and all I'm looking for the court to do is give me give me a wee bit more time, explain things, don't try and rush me and stuff, and don't interrupt me. So we're back in court now, and what's happened is there was a flurry of activity. Santander then put in an application to strike out my writ. So I have 4 applications in, and they've got 1 coming the other way. My head's melting at this stage. I'm trying to juggle all these, and I'm not a barrister. You know, I've been punching above my weight for a long time. So I asked for a case management hearing. And a case management hearing isn't litigation. It's literally the nuts and bolts. Who's doing what, right? There's this first case. What needs done? Who's doing it? What's the time frame? Then they move on to the next one, and it just plans it all out so that I've got a script to work to and I know what I need to do. So the judge sent me an email. So he gave me directions, and he says, in line with your ADHD diagnosis and the equal treatment bench book on how judges are supposed to deal with lay litigants, in line with all of that, I'm going to send you an email. I've got the staff to send an email with the directions if that helps. And I said, no, that's great. So I get an email from the court, and it gave 5 directions, and the 5th one was, when the first 4's done, contact the office and we'll arrange a case management hearing. So they arranged for a hearing on the 19th of December.
This year?
This year, yeah. So I go into the court, and I thought they were going to talk about basically the fallout of my ADHD and the psychiatrist reports and everything else about that there, and how they're going to plan it out to sort of try and accommodate me even slightly. I think that the way they need to treat me is the way everyone should be treated, and you shouldn't have to be diagnosed with anything for them to give you a bit of a break and take, ease off because you're not a barrister. But I went into that court on the 19th of December, and instead of talking about the stuff that I understood we were going to talk about, the judge just went, this has gone on long enough. I'm just going to set this for a trial on the 25th and 26th of January. So today's 25th of January. So I couldn't think on my feet. If I get ambushed by something, my brain doesn't work that way. I go home, sit down, calm, and go into my emails and speak to a couple of people. Then my head starts working, and then I just hit the keyboard. And I that's my way of communicating. So I drafted out a big email explaining why I didn't consent to the hearings going on, that each of them 4 applications of mine, plus the one from theirs, has got a practice direction which dictates what's supposed to happen. I'm outstanding a whole lot of evidence. The audio files, remember the way the judge treated me and I recused her and stuff? I've got the audio file of that. I've been trying for a year to get it. They said that my ER1 wasn't good enough, and it was £500. So for one disc with 1 hearing on it, it's £37. One disc with 10 hearings on it, it's £550. I couldn't afford it. They wouldn't accept the ER1. But as far as I'm concerned, we're getting the runabout. So eventually now they will accept the ER1. So they arrived on the 12th of January. In the middle of all that, my mum's took really sick and she's in hospital and she's having problems. She's not taking her medicine and all sort of stuff. So we're having to go up on a daily basis. Of all my brothers, I'm the only one that drives. So I was assaulted by a bouncer in an unprovoked attack on Boxing Night. He just literally, I was trying to take a photograph and I leaned back to take a picture. And I bumped into him. The next thing, he grabbed me by the throat, dragged me 4 meters, and he's 20 stone, 6'4", threw me onto the floor, and I've got a broken coccyx as a result of it, right? So I'm in massive pain, and then I'm a primary carer for my mum. I'm overwhelmed by all this stuff, and I'm sent to the court. All of this stress, the biggest stress for me is that you're not allowing me time to go through all these applications, do a case management hearing. You're supposed to be helping me here and let me understand, but you're putting me under massive pressure, plus 2 things outside of my control happened that's taken up most of my life at the minute. So I went and get a doctor's sick line. The doctor gave me a sick line for 6 weeks to give me a break. I put it into the court. The judge replied and says, that doesn't say that you can't take part in litigation. It says stress and back pain. He says, but it doesn't, it's a work fit. He says, what do you work at? All these nonsense, he basically didn't accept it. So I had to go and pay 30 quid to the doctor to get him to write a letter. And then I had to go to the psychologist and get her to do an urgent report, and I haven't been billed for that yet, so I'm paying for that as well. And all this week, I was putting all that in.
Can I ask, is it worth it all? The unbelievable toll of stress, the chaos, the uncertainty, your wife's left you. Yeah. I would say this is a great deal to do with. You have 2 children. You're in a house that your wife's actually just now said, fuck that, I'm out. Mm-hmm. And what's the end goal now?
The marriage was over a long time ago, and it wasn't, the case didn't help, but it was other stuff that happened. And it was over. And to be honest, it's the best thing that's ever happened. To be honest, the Waynes are a lot happier, I'm a lot happier, and I hope she's a lot happier. But it did have an effect. There's been a fallout from my actions, from the choice that I've taken. But I'm looking at the bigger picture, and it's not that I'm getting tunnel vision and being polarized about this. I keep going back and reflecting on it. I'm speaking to other people around Northern Ireland who are the victims of the same process.
But you're their martyr. You're the one paying the toll. If you fight that, they don't have to. If you set the precedent, they don't need to. You're the one at loss. You for the last, 2006? Did you say the start? No, sorry, 2008.
Yeah.
So effectively for the last 14 years, you don't know whether you will see the next Christmas in that house.
That's right.
And it's cost you your job. You've been imprisoned with paedophiles. Yeah. You've untold physical stress, mental stress, the money, the hours that you have put in. If you were to bill minimum wage to, would account to thousands and thousands of pounds, I have no doubt. There has to be a point, and I know you're saying the thing, and I find it very, very hard to grasp, because it's not me, and it's not John. It's not. We're not in that position, and I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, at some point, if your health took a turn or something happened that reprioritized or looked at something, would you turn around and say, if that happened to me again, would I do the same again? Would I go down the same road?
I've asked myself the same question.
Because I'm going to be honest, I don't see them allowing you to win, because the can of worms that comes from the precedent that you would set would unstabilize central banks effectively. If they allowed you to say money ain't money, it ain't real, mortgages aren't secured, the practices are fucked, the judges are in on it, the wealthy have to keep the wealthy wealthy, they have to keep the poor poor, the way the world has to work, they're not going to let it happen. And I'm not coming to negative, because I would be saying, fuck, you have had some run of it. And it's clear to me, now we have reiterated that the stuff that's been said is alleged. But it's clear to me, some of the stuff you've said, and quite a few times you have factual evidence that you proved that people have been lying along the way. You've been blocked. It doesn't sound right to me, some of them. Some of it, to me, I have to be honest, summarising this up, some of it feels like it's got a bit theatrical, a bit emotional. There's people in the background that are happy enough to feed you, the litigation work with you and put these things in, and it's more becoming delay tactics now, because they've ruled twice now again. Do they see them third time overturn? What I'm saying is there a point where you're going to have to say, what am I doing here?
I don't see the point in having went through this entire experience to get...
You're that deep down the rabbit hole.
3/4 of the way up Mount Everest and then go, you know what, I've had enough. And again, what I'm saying is about the whole economic thing there. You said earlier on there that the whole fiat currencies are going to collapse and we're facing an imminent collapse. Most of that collapse is due to the illegalities and the gambling of all the banks and all the LIBOR rigging and all
but that's what I'm saying. The powers that be that's involved in this and what you are looking as the outcome, to me it seems like they would have been better to write off the debt of the house. So fuck this, move on, roll on, because they'd have paid it anyway. To me, they can't let you win. That's evident. You've definitely fucked off the judicial system in Northern Ireland, whether they like to admit this personal or not, because you've obviously embarrassed her, because she recused herself before she jumped before she got pushed. Mm-hmm. So there's been people that have been embarrassed along the way. Santander have been proved to be lying and they've been put out. So there's people that have had their feathers ruffled, and you are the biggest thorn in their fucking side. With no doubt, here is a guy not trained in law, that was with police, that has had a thing that is made clear and obviously very rehearsed. And there is people obviously in the background. We were talking about, what was that? Some of them guys in the south that they would be supporting you in that there, and would also help you read up on the litigation, because there would be a lot to try and cover to do that on your own. Yeah. What I'm trying to say in a summary of this is, at what cost? At what untold cost? Right, so what is the end goal? What makes you go away and to them?
Right. There's two costs. Personal cost and a cost to society. I'm trying to balance the two of them. I don't want to get through this experience. It's been going on too long and I need it to be over. But if I pack it in now and walk away and say, well, I put in a fair enough effort, this problem is going to continue, and the same people doing the same things are going to be dealing with my children and your children. And as men, I believe we need to stand up and do the right thing. And there's an awful lot going on this planet. And it's like a bully comes into a playground. 9 out of 10 people are going to go and cower in the corner. There's not many people who will go and try and stand up against the bully.
There's no doubt in what you're saying. You went to prison for the cause of this. You shared tea with fucking pedos next door. Like, there's no doubt in your intentions. And like, if somebody is watching this thinking you were doing that because you did want to pay your mortgage, they've massively missed the point. You've cost you far more than it ever would have been to fucking just bust your balls and pay it. So I have no doubt that's not what it's about. But some people might say that. So you need,
and that's fair enough.
So you need,
and I'm
so
willing to take
I have,
whatever.
no. But I have no doubt. There's no fucking way the sacrifice stress, the thing is worth it. There's no house worth it. There's no castle worth it. There's no mansion worth it.
But at this stage, it's not about the house.
No. And you're halfway down the rabbit hole.
Right, so where I stand at this minute in time, up to present time, what happened today in court, there was a hearing today and a hearing tomorrow. And randomly, you can acknowledge, you contacted me and you asked me, did I want to do it? And you asked me, could I do it today? And that just blew my head that on the one day sandwiched in between these two hearings that we're going to decide the outcome of this case, you asked me for an interview.
You could do without this.
And the reason why I'm here, they may be trying to say that, oh, you can't turn up to court because you're dealing with stress and stuff. This is a de-stressor for me. This is like talking therapy for me. This is enabling me to vent off a wee bit, and because it is stressful, and this is actually assisting me. And I'm not doing it to have a broad attack at the court. I'm not saying all judges are crooked or bars or anything else, but there's definitely problems in there.
There
definitely is.
We're going to finish up here now, and I'm going to put a couple of series of big questions to you.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
Of where I'm at now in litigation.
Yeah.
What I'm alleging is that a barrister and a solicitor willfully and intentionally misled the court and amounting to crimes or contempt of court that they should both be struck off for. And that all I'm asking the court is I'm making serious allegations. I want the two of them to give an affidavit and I want to be able to cross-examine them. That's a fair trial. They get to say their say and I get to examine them. And if the judge deems that they haven't done what I allege, then I've received a fair trial and they've been found innocent. As it stands, the judge today told me under no circumstances was he going to make them do an affidavit, and unless they wanted to do it themselves, and that I wasn't allowed to cross-examine them. So they are actively protecting people that I'm openly accusing of extremely serious allegations. The Banker's Book of Evidence has been absolutely blocked at every single turn. So as I get into this final bit of litigation here, I've received information. I was supposed to go, because of litigation, I had to cancel my flight and not go. But I've received information, and it indicates, there's new information that indicates that Santander have never had standing. When they sold the loan and stuff like that they have never had a locus standing to take a case against me in the first place. So I can see like 3 or 4 things that can enable me to win, but I don't feel that I'm fighting Santander. I feel that I'm fighting Santander and the judiciary, and that's massive.
Do you believe there is a ring or level of corruption or collusion between barristers and judges to make certain things go away that's in the interest of hierarchy? I
could 100% yes. And I'm not saying they're all in on it. There's good people in there, but I think the rule of law in Northern Ireland has broken down. I have seen so many examples. I could get 20 or 25 people to come into this room to tell you their stories and how they were absolutely screwed over and their properties took off them.
I think we're going to wrap it up here because we really could go for somewhere captivated, and this is a couple of part series. I think we're gonna wrap it up there. I think no matter what, my mind is fucking bent. I have to say before we wrap up, there was a lot of sideward accusations, not accusations, but light shed on some things that we have to be very clear about. We are not endorsing and saying that these are factual. These are the story that you tell us, and this is your podcast, and this is your time to say what you think.
Yes.
We, as us, we just wanted to give you your first shot. We wanted to ask questions. We've played devil's advocate sometimes in it. But I think anybody watching this is going to make them think. Or are still listening. If they're still there, it's going to make them think. But what do you think, Sean? Do you want to wrap that up? And
my head's melted at this stage.
Take it away, wrap her up, because
literally my head at this stage, I'm like, I wish you all the best of luck with wherever this is going to end up. But it's just, you've lost so much. I feel like you've lost so much. Like
I genuinely, I heard your story before you come. You work up preconceived ideas. Is this man mad? Is he away with the fucking phrase? Is this turned into a pantomime? What is it? I don't think, speaking to you now, I don't think any of these things. I have to be honest, Andy, I think your nobility is blindly leading you down a self-destructive route, because in the end, what do we win? You've forfeited time with your children, you've forfeited time at home. It's taken a personal toll on you, and it's surely affected your fucking health, your mental health. To make a stand for people that won't give a fuck, and I mean this about you, it's them, and there's people behind you want you to be their martyr because that'll enable them. Aye. But that's what I'm saying, and I trying to articulate this. I respect you for you have some cojones. There is no doubt in my mind, and to dig in, you must be one of the most stubborn, mentally strong, fixated people I know. But I worry that it was at your own cost, and I'm just going to say I wish you the very best, and I hope you get the fairness to be heard. So, but we'll let you wrap it up.
To sum up, that's all I'm looking for. All I'm looking for, honestly, is for me to be facilitated with a fair trial. That I'm able to, if I've got 10 issues, and I can provide facts, evidence, logic, and reason to back them up. I'm not just making them up, and I can articulate them all. And they're all heard fairly, and I lose this case, I'll either start paying the mortgage or do whatever I do or walk out of the house. I'm giving this my best shot. My problem is that the rule of law in Northern Ireland is broken down. There's a question mark in my mind over the judiciary, the fairness and the impartiality of them. It's a massive, bigger social question, and other people need to take aware of this. Like at this minute in time, the crosshairs are on me. And whatever happens in my case happens, but it could happen to either of the two of you, any of the three of you, or anybody else, and you'll be faced with the same circumstances as me. And I'm telling you that it's completely unfair what's happening in the courts. All I'm looking for is a fair go. And that's
I hope you get it.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Brilliant.
Gentlemen.
You have the record for our longest ever podcast. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Special thanks to Jason at Posh and Pans for the cups. Groovy.
Good man, Jason.
Cheers, thank you.
Thanks very much.